I never imagined that the quiet life I built would shatter in silence, not with a scream or a fight, but with a calm, calculated plan I kept hidden from everyone. What happened next changed everything, including the very company my cheating wife thought was her safe haven. My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm a 36-year-old systems analyst, basically the guy who keeps complex computer networks from falling apart. It's not glamorous, but it pays well, and I was proud of the quiet life I built. I liked predictability, structure, peace. I worked from home most days, handled clients remotely, and came home to my wife, Melissa, who always made life feel warmer than the rest of the world. Melissa and I had been married for 8 years. We met at a conference when I was still figuring out my career and she was just starting at a marketing firm. She had this fire in her, ambitious, sharp, magnetic. I loved that about her. We clicked fast. She was the kind of woman who made people lean in when she talked, and I always felt lucky she chose me. Our house was modest but filled with little touches of her, candles she liked, throw pillows she changed with the seasons, books half-read stacked near her nightstand. We cooked together most nights. She'd complain about her over-demanding boss, and I'd listen, nodding between bites of pasta or curry. Her job at the firm had grown intense over the past year, but I chalked that up to her drive. She was always climbing, always reaching. I admired it. We'd been saving for a trip to Italy, her dream destination. We even talked about maybe starting a family in the next year or two. Things weren't perfect, but they felt stable. Good, even. Looking back, there were small things I brushed off. Her work trips became more frequent. Her phone was always on silent, always face down. She laughed less at my bad jokes. But relationships go through phases, right? I told myself she was just tired, that the long hours were draining her. And I believed it, because when you love someone, you trust them. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You don't go digging for cracks when everything looks fine on the surface. But the surface was just that, thin, smooth, and hiding something dark beneath. I didn't know it then, but the quiet life I'd built so carefully was already starting to unravel. I just hadn't heard it breaking yet. It started with a late meeting. Melissa called me around 8 p.m. one Thursday, saying her boss had pulled her into an emergency client session and she'd be home late. That wasn't too unusual. She was in management now and her company pushed hard. But something about her voice stuck with me. Too chipper, like she was reading from a script. I waited up that night, something I hadn't done in months. When she finally walked in close to midnight, her makeup still looked fresh. Her perfume lingered longer than usual. I asked how the meeting went, and she gave a vague answer, already heading for the shower before I could ask anything else. It wasn't proof, just a feeling. I didn't want to be the kind of husband who snoops or questions every move. That kind of insecurity poisons a marriage. But in the days that followed, I couldn't ignore the itch in the back of my mind. She started hiding her phone, locking it, even changed the password. Her laughter on the phone turned into whispers. She took longer showers, wore new lingerie I'd never seen before and didn't seem to be wearing it for me. One morning, she left her laptop open in the kitchen while she went to grab coffee. A chat window blinked open on the screen. Just a few words. Last night was amazing. Same hotel next week. No name, no emojis. Just plain, direct, and so very clear. My stomach dropped. I sat frozen in my chair, not even touching the coffee in my hand. I closed the laptop before she came back, pretended everything was fine. Said goodbye with a kiss on her cheek that felt colder than ice. I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I started paying attention, really paying attention. I tracked her trips, watched her patterns. She was always with the same client, working late in the same hotel downtown. I checked the hotel's directory once. Her boss, Jeremy Hands, was booked for the same nights. That told me everything I needed to know. But I didn't explode. I didn't throw accusations. I knew Melissa too well. She'd lie, deflect, maybe even gaslight me into thinking I was paranoid. And honestly, I didn't have the strength yet to face what this meant for us. So I stayed quiet. I let the whispers grow louder in my mind, even as I smiled across the dinner table and pretended not to notice her checking her phone under the table. She had no idea I knew, not yet. But I was starting to understand what kind of storm I was really in. The full truth came crashing down on a rainy Saturday afternoon. Melissa said she was heading to a networking brunch with her team. She left dressed sharper than usual, heels, red lipstick, a fitted black dress. I stood at the window after she pulled out of the driveway, watching the rain streak across the glass like slow-moving cracks. I didn't follow her right away. I sat there for a while, hands clenched, heart racing, wondering if I really wanted to see what I already knew. But curiosity isn't the right word. It was survival. I needed proof, not just digital breadcrumbs or vague suspicions. I needed something undeniable, something real that would destroy any part of me still clinging to the hope that maybe I was wrong. I grabbed my keys, got in my car, and followed her. She drove to the downtown hotel, the same one from the chat message. She parked underground, and I waited until she was out of sight before stepping into the lobby. I stayed near the elevators, pretending to check my phone. I didn't know exactly what I was waiting for until I saw him, Jeremy, her boss. He walked through the lobby casually, confident. A man who wasn't worried about being seen. And then Melissa appeared beside him, her arm sliding around his waist like it belonged there. They didn't even try to hide it. No shame, no hesitation. They laughed at something, her head tilted toward him, and then the two of them disappeared into the elevator. I stood there for a long time after the doors closed. I couldn't breathe. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was humiliating. Everything I'd believed about our marriage, the trust I had in her, the life we were building, all of it shattered in that moment. And what hurt most wasn't just that she was cheating. It was how easy it seemed for her, like I was already a distant memory, a man she had quietly erased from her world. I went home in silence, didn't text her, didn't call. Just sat on the edge of the bed we used to share and stared at the wall, the echo of their laughter still playing in my ears. That night she came home and kissed me on the forehead like nothing had happened. I kissed her back, not because I forgave her, but because I had made a decision. I wasn't going to yell, I wasn't going to beg. I was going to end this on my terms. Quietly, something in me broke that night, but not in the way Melissa would have expected. I didn't fall apart. I didn't scream or cry or demand answers. I just disconnected, like a switch had flipped and all the emotions, grief, anger, humiliation, froze beneath a layer of ice. I looked at Melissa that evening while she changed into her pajamas and climbed into bed beside me, and I felt nothing but a cold, distant clarity. She thought she'd gotten away with it. That was her first mistake. Over the next few days, I moved carefully. I acted normal, maybe even better than normal. I cooked dinner, cleaned the kitchen, laughed at her stories. I was attentive, present. It must have made her feel comfortable, safe, like I'd never suspect a thing. That was her second mistake. The thing about being a systems analyst is that you're trained to find weaknesses, vulnerabilities people don't even realize are there. Melissa and her boss had made one critical error. They underestimated me. They thought I was soft, predictable, passive. They were wrong. I started building a plan, not out of spite but out of necessity. I needed to take back control of my life, my dignity, and, strangely enough, my peace. I didn't want revenge that involved shouting matches or dramatic scenes. I didn't want to burn their world to the ground. I just wanted to quietly remove every piece of mine from it, and then let the pieces they thought they controlled start to collapse on their own. I began collecting digital traces, hotel booking confirmations, meeting schedules, internal office communications Melissa occasionally mentioned in passing. I even created a fake profile to follow her boss's private social media posts. He was cocky, careless, the kind of guy who thought rules were made for other people. It wasn't hard to start seeing the cracks in their professional lives, too. Their relationship wasn't just a secret affair, it was crossing ethical lines in their company. Favoritism, confidential leaks, decision-making blurred by personal bias. I didn't say a word. I just kept watching, collecting, waiting. Each day I pretended things were fine. Melissa drifted further from the truth and deeper into her lie, and that gave me more room to maneuver. I was no longer the broken husband, grieving a lost marriage. I was the quiet storm they never saw coming. It was around this time that I stopped thinking of myself as a husband and started thinking like a tactician. Melissa didn't know that her casual conversations at home were giving me everything I needed. She'd vent over wine about office drama, about how Jeremy, her boss, was making reckless decisions, and how their team was stretched thin because of his ego. She didn't know I was listening with a different kind of interest now. I started gathering every breadcrumb. Through her rants, I learned about an upcoming pitch their company was preparing, a major campaign for a big-name tech client. It was the kind of deal that could land her department in the spotlight or ruin their reputation if it went wrong. Melissa had been helping Jeremy with the proposal outside of work hours, if helping was the right word. Using publicly available information and a few deep dives, I drafted my own version of their proposal but structured it better. Cleaner data, smarter strategies, tighter financials. It wasn't theft. It was correction. I wasn't doing it to show them up. I was doing it because I knew eventually there'd be a moment when I could quietly slide this into the right hands. But first, I needed cracks to show in their armor. So I planted a few. From a burner email, I anonymously leaked internal inconsistencies in their marketing materials to a small industry blog that Melissa followed religiously. Nothing direct, just enough to raise eyebrows. Then, I submitted a few anonymous reviews about Jeremy's leadership to platforms that HR departments tend to monitor. I knew it would take time. I wasn't trying to destroy them overnight. I just wanted them off balance. At home, I played the same role, loving, patient Daniel. I made her coffee in the mornings, picked up takeout when she said she was too tired to cook. She probably thought the distance between us had melted, that I'd let go of the suspicion. That was her third mistake. Because every time she relaxed, she let something else slip. A name, a client, a new crack in the facade. I logged it all, connecting the dots like I was running an investigation. And through it all, I kept one truth in mind. I didn't need revenge that shouted. I just needed revenge that worked. By now, every step I took felt precise, measured like chess. I wasn't moving out of rage anymore. I was focused. Cold. Focused not on destroying Melissa and Jeremy, but on taking back something they didn't even realize they stole, my power. While they paraded around in secret, thinking no one saw them, I was quietly building connections of my own. A contact of mine from a previous contract, Lillian Chen, worked at the very tech company Melissa and Jeremy were trying to land. We had stayed in touch after I helped her firm fix a data pipeline issue, and she'd always said, "If you ever want to make a move, come talk to me first." So I did. We had lunch one weekday when Melissa was supposedly working late. I laid out my skill set and casually mentioned the proposal I heard about through a friend at a marketing agency. No names. I talked about the gaps in the pitch, what I'd change, how the whole campaign could run better if led by someone with an actual understanding of systems and user behavior. Lillian leaned in. I could see her mind clicking. She asked for a sample proposal, so I gave her the one I'd written, stripped of any trace that linked it back to Melissa or Jeremy. It was sharp, efficient, better than anything they were capable of. She told me she'd pass it up the chain. When I walked away from that lunch, I wasn't just a bitter husband anymore. I was a silent competitor in a race they didn't even know they were losing. At home, things continued like a strange play. Melissa started smiling more. She was lighter. Maybe she thought she had finally pulled it off, that I'd stopped suspecting, that I was healed, accepting, distant. She even suggested we take that Italy trip again sometime when things settled down. I told her I'd think about it. She touched my hand gently, probably thinking she still had me wrapped around her finger. But the truth was I was already gone, not physically, not yet, but emotionally. I had already walked out that door weeks ago. Melissa didn't know it, but she was about to run headfirst into the very thing she thought she'd secured. And the best part, I wouldn't even have to raise my voice. The first crack came in the form of a nervous glance. Melissa sat across from me one evening, scrolling through her phone while I pretended to be absorbed in a rerun of some old sitcom. She was quiet, too quiet. Her thumb hovered over the screen longer than usual. Then she turned the phone face down again. I knew that look, something had shifted. The next morning, I saw her pacing the hallway, muttering under her breath, holding a mug she never drank from. When I asked if everything was okay, she gave me a tight smile and said, "Just work stuff. Stress." Stress, huh? Later that week, she skipped her usual Thursday meeting. When I asked about it, she mumbled something about a scheduling conflict and disappeared into the bedroom. I already knew the truth. Jeremy had received a warning from upper management after a client raised concerns about favoritism in the campaign pitch process. Lillian had told me during a second lunch that someone from her team had reached out to Melissa's firm to ask tough questions about the original proposal. Apparently, the campaign they'd submitted had data inconsistencies and was poorly structured. Someone higher up, someone who had seen my version, had quietly compared the two. They weren't impressed with hers. Rumors started trickling in through online industry groups. A possible internal investigation, a potential reassignment of Jeremy's role. It wasn't public, not yet, but it was brewing. Slowly, quietly. Melissa didn't tell me anything, of course, but her body did. She came home drained, distant. She barely touched her food. She stayed glued to her phone, texting furiously one moment, then letting it sit untouched for hours the next. I knew the tone had changed between her and Jeremy. Pressure reveals cracks in everything, including affairs. I stayed supportive, asked if she needed anything, rubbed her shoulders, played the part of the caring, clueless husband. It was almost poetic. By the end of that week, she sat at the kitchen table staring into space while her tea went cold. I could see the doubt creeping in. The confidence she'd once worn like armor was slipping off, piece by piece. And still, I said nothing. Because I didn't need to scream or accuse or expose. All I had to do was let the truth, now out in the open air, do what it always does. Destroy. The breaking point came faster than I expected. It was a Wednesday night. I got home from the gym to find Melissa sitting on the edge of the couch, staring at her phone like it had just betrayed her. Her makeup was still on, but her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked up when I walked in, startled, like she forgot we lived in the same house. She quickly wiped her face and forced a smile. "Hey, didn't hear you come in." I asked if she was okay. She nodded, but the way her hands trembled as she reached for her water said otherwise. I went to take a shower, giving her space, pretending not to notice. When I came back out, she was in the kitchen pouring herself a second glass of wine. That was unusual. Melissa didn't drink much, especially not on a weekday. As I passed her to grab a bottle of water, she spoke, voice quieter than I'd ever heard. "Do you think people deserve second chances?" I turned to her slowly. "Depends, did they learn from the first one?" She didn't respond, just looked down at her glass. I sat beside her. "Is everything okay at work?" She hesitated. "Jeremy S. under review. Someone raised concerns. HR's involved." I played dumb. "Really? That's serious?" She nodded. "There's talk that someone submitted a rival campaign, an anonymous pitch that blew hours out of the water. The client requested a new meeting with someone outside the current team." I didn't react. I simply sipped my water and said, "Sounds like the company's trying to do what's best." She studied me for a second, as if seeing something in my face she hadn't noticed before. I held her gaze, steady and calm. And then the confession came, not the full one, but enough. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "With him, I thought it was just temporary. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I nodded slowly. "You know, Melissa, I always thought if something like this happened, I'd fall apart, that I'd be angry or crushed, but I'm not." She blinked. "You're not?" "No, because I already grieved this relationship weeks ago." Her eyes filled with tears. "So what does that mean for us?" I stood calm, resolved. "It means you'll get through your work crisis on your own. I won't stand in your way, but I won't stay in your shadow either." And with that, I left her sitting there in silence. She had broken everything, but I had already begun building something better. A week after that conversation, I got the call. It was Lillian. She sounded upbeat, energized. "Daniel, I just got out of a board meeting. They reviewed your campaign strategy in full. They were blown away, not just by the structure, but by how clearly it addressed the client's pain points. It was elegant." I felt a small surge of vindication. I stayed quiet, listening. She continued, "They want to bring you on board not just as a consultant, but as a senior strategy advisor. Full-time, competitive salary. You'd report directly to the executive team. It's a huge step up, Daniel." I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window, letting her words settle. I had started this whole process simply wanting to regain a sense of control, to leave the mess Melissa and Jeremy created without making myself a victim. But now, I was walking into a better life, a better position, a better version of myself. "Daniel," she asked gently. I smiled. "Tell them I accept." We spoke for a few more minutes, discussed logistics, paperwork, and an onboarding meeting. By the time I hung up, my heart was steady. There was no jumping for joy, no outburst of celebration. Just a quiet satisfaction, like I'd finally reached the other side of a long, brutal storm. Later that night, Melissa came home looking like she'd aged 5 years. Her face was pale, her movements sluggish. She didn't say much, just mumbled a greeting and went straight to the bedroom. I didn't ask questions. I already knew. Jeremy had been demoted. The client deal was off the table. Internal reshuffling had begun, and Melissa's name was floating in those uncomfortable circles where reputations fade fast. At dinner, I finally spoke. I got a new job offer today. Her eyes widened, the fork pausing midair. Oh. Senior strategy advisor, full-time, starts next month. She blinked, the weight of it settling in. That's amazing. With who? I looked her dead in the eye. The client you and Jeremy were trying to land. Her jaw slackened. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I just got up, cleared my plate, and walked away. The beauty of quiet revenge isn't in the destruction. It's in the rebuild, when you rise while they sink. Moving out was easier than I expected. There was no dramatic fight, no screaming in the driveway. I didn't even wait for Melissa to be home. I packed while she was at work, left my keys on the kitchen counter, and took the dog, because frankly, I'd always been the one taking care of him anyway. The apartment I moved into wasn't fancy. It was quiet, clean, mine. The first night I slept there, I left the windows open, let the breeze in, and felt something I hadn't in months. Freedom. Not the kind that comes from running away, but the kind you earn inch by inch when you rebuild yourself from the inside out. Melissa texted a few times. First, a short "Where are you?" followed by a longer, more desperate "Can we talk?" I didn't respond to either. Not because I hated her, but because there was nothing left to say. She made her choices, and so did I. My new job started 2 weeks later. The office was sleek and forward-thinking, open floor plan, collaborative energy, and most importantly, a team that respected what I brought to the table. No one knew the full story. They didn't need to. All they saw was someone sharp, experienced, and ready to lead. Lillian gave me a warm welcome on my first day. "Funny how things come full circle, huh?" she said with a wink. I smiled. Yeah, funny. I didn't need to explain how I'd gotten here. The truth had done all the heavy lifting. The lies had collapsed under their own weight. And me? I just stood still while the storm passed. Sometimes people ask if I ever feel guilty. The truth is, I don't. I never exposed Melissa. I never went after Jeremy publicly. I never shouted or threw things or posted online rants. I let them reveal themselves. All I did was take the pieces they discarded, my dignity, my peace, my ambition, and build something stronger. And now, every morning I walk into that office with my head high. I remember who I was before I let someone like her shrink me. I'm not that man anymore. I'm not waiting to be chosen, rescued, or validated. I'm building my own story now. And this time, I'm the one writing every word.